Matt channel, welcome. Today we are making a rub over set or bezel setting edge for a emerald cut stone or any kind of gemstone where it's got flat sides and the corners cut off. I'm going to show you how to do a rub over setting for that because I look on YouTube what other jewelers are doing sometimes and everyone's doing bezel set, but they always do a round stone or an oval stone. They don't do anything more complicated than that. So I'll show you how I make what I call a rub over setting, or I think most people call bezel set for like an emerald cut stone. So yeah, I'll show you how to do that. So we'll get into it as soon as I've said thank you to these new patrons. We've got David Carey, Chris Border, Jonathan Crow, and a new one today. I'm very sorry I'm going to mispronounce your name. Elijah. Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, thank you to all the patrons. It really does enable me and help me out making these videos. Even after 2 years of making videos for the YouTube channel, still got loads of stuff to share, so I'm eager to get on with it. And then patrons making little contributions here and there really genuinely does help me, so especially grateful to the patrons. If you want to become a patron yourself, there's a link in the description to do so. Cool, right, let's get on with this setting edge. So with money I get from patrons, I buy little things to enable me to make videos in the future, and this is one of the things I bought a few months ago, synthetic emerald. So this is what we're going to make in a setting edge for. Just to give you an idea of when this might be, you might need to do this kind of thing. I'm not talking about putting a big wall down the side to hide the whole stone. I'm thinking like, and this is just a crappy old ring I had in my toolbox. If you've got a big wide ring with a big flat on top, you could have that set on it. But it's not sticking up, it's sort of right down against the surface. So you just need a little edge to go around the stone and hold it in position. Yeah, this bit of metal is borderline a bit too shallow, but I could use it. Sort of going through the job in my mind as I hold it next to it, it's just about usable. But I'll give you some measurements just so you can compare what you may have and thinking of doing. This bit of metal is just under 2 mil. I would like it a little bit more, maybe 2.1. I'd be a bit more satisfied with. It just needs a little bit taller edge. And my stone, 10 mil wide by 12 mil long. Just to put that information there to compare it to what you've got if you're doing this job on something similar. God, I haven't done a job like this for a long time. So, first step, I'm just going to file one end flat and nice. So we're working with the stone a lot, so make sure there's no tools in your skin, and there's not, you know, I've mentioned loads of times on the channel before, I like to give my gemstones I work with a little home, like a little piece of paper or one of those little seedable plastic bags, just somewhere where you can put it and you can see it clearly and it's safe, it's not got dust and tools scratching all over it. Yeah, I think it's good working practice. Because something like that, if that's a real emerald, mega money. And if it's a customer stone as well, could be a family heirloom, could have been in their family for generations, worth a fortune. Having it remodeled, like so old, you've got to redesign it so people want to wear it, and it's a bit out of fashion if it's like 100 years old, the old mount it was in. Yeah, very expensive, very sentimental, you've got to look after it, and it's not acceptable. Any kind of mark, especially any kind of breakage, any chip, even like a tiniest little scratch, it's not acceptable. It's got to go back to them. Perfect. Yeah, let's make a setting edge for it. So what I'm doing, I flatten that edge. It's a rub over set, it's a bezel set, so it's got to slide down in this setting edge. So I just put my stone next to it and just sort of go through the job in my mind, just envisage the corners and stuff bending around. And here's a top tip for you. If you take on any kind of job like that with an expensive stone, or any kind of stone really, if it's got to come out of a mount and you're making a new mount for it, like really study the stone like closely. Like it's great if you're with the customer, like look at the piece, look at the stone, because there's a chance they've never actually looked at it through a 10 times loop. I can't find mine, but you know, jeweler's loop. You might see a little crack or scratch or something, or a line you're a bit suspect. Like it can be, especially emerald, a very risky stone to work on. So yeah, it's great if the customer's there and it's the first time in your hands, you can point out any problems with it, and you can even show them, like prove it. Save you a headache in the future. Like, even if the customer goes and then you take the stone out and then you tell them about a mark or scratch on it, you don't know how they're going to react. They might say, oh, thank you for telling me. Or they might say, that wasn't like that when I gave it to you. some people are a headache. So protect yourself by telling them as much as you can about it while they're with you. So there's no shank or anything going to be joined up to it. So it doesn't matter where really you start, but I would recommend not having the end on a corner. It's more awkward to get the ends to join up, and when they do join up, you end up with a corner that's got a sharp edge rather than a kind of bent corner like all the others of them. So I recommend starting from in between the corners. You just end up with all corners identical, and it's easier to join the ends up flat rather than trying to join them up at a special angle, because that join's got to be really good and tight. If you're trying to file fancy angles on them and join them up, you get it a bit wrong. You've then got to overfile one side, and then one side's going down a bit more, and you're changing the shape and the dimensions of it. It's a bit of a mess. Much easier to finish it when you start in between the corners. So that's what I'll be doing. But yeah, again, it doesn't really matter which one you do it. Just make sure that join is really good. This might be a sigh of relief. You know, like doing a 4-claw collet, like cut out, get the exact mark exactly where you want it, the corner. And I'll cut it with a saw blade and then start filing it out. Someone at the door. And I'll start filing it out to get the corner to fold up nicely. You've got to be really accurate where you put that corner. So it might be a relief for you to hear that I'm not doing that with this. It's not like doing imagine doing 8 of those, trying to get it really accurate. That'll be difficult and sort of a bit of a messy way to work when it's so many angle changes. So that's why I'm starting with a thick piece of metal. So I'm just going to bend it up with pliers. I'll do it quite well, and then for the exact flatness and corners, I'll do it with a file. But that's why we start with a thick bit of metal, so I've got room to do that. So yeah, working with the stone a lot, putting that flat on there, and then checking how it sits with that corner angle. I kind of got it pretty good just then. But I've got to be accurate on the next one, because I want that corner flat to sit against the metal, and then start bending. So I'm using these pliers. They're slightly tapered, yeah, so watch out for that. Make sure you're not bending it at weird angles. Make sure that flat is directly up and down across the metal. Looking for a nice right angle now, with ability to file a nice flat in that corner and get it to fit good. See what I've done there? Oh, sorry, I wasn't showing you anything, just looked at the camera. So yeah, I was looking for a nice right angle, and then that corner, be able to file it so that corner fits really nice in there. So that's what I've just done. It's ideal if you can just bend it in the correct place every bend, because it's so much faster to work, and then you finish with a piece that's just so much more nicely made than one that you had to bend and then straighten it, bend it slightly different place. It's going to happen when you first start trying it, and it does still happen to me, to be honest, and like bend it, I don't quite like where it is, so I end up having to adjust it, and I'm not happy about it. It's much better if you can just bend it in the right place. You'll finish it much faster, and it'll be much neater as well. So that's what we're aiming for. But see, I just line it up, just have a look. Gently put my pliers on it. Being careful not to touch the stone. Just gives me an idea. So I've got my pliers just there. A touch across in a little bit more. I think that's good to go. You can always bend it a little bit. Double check it again. You know, I said talking about studying your stone as well. Don't just assume your stone is like perfectly straight, perfectly parallel. It might have one side slightly thinner than the other. If that's the case, I will get a marker pen and just put a dot on one side, just so I know I'm picking up the stone and holding it the same way every time. So I'll just show you what I did. A bit closer. Excuse my hands, just working on my motorbike. See that? It's going to have to be filed across a little bit. I've got that bend started there. I think once I bend that, it'll just be a little bit tight, which is great, because that means I can file it back and then get the stone sort of just sliding in nicely. So yeah, main things to say is just have your stone very handy and just keep checking it all the time. Just bend it a little bit. Start a bend, check it with a stone. Continue the bend a little bit more and then check the stone, and then just constantly, not just what you're doing at that moment, comparing it to what you've already done as well, making sure things are all symmetrical and looking good. So things come back to mind now. I'm working on it. Like I mentioned, that stone, you may be working from one end of the stone and one end being thinner. That's good for making the mount, but if you've got this thick bit of metal, it's nice if you can hide the fact that the stone's a bit wonky. The stone's a little bit wrong. You don't have to make the setting edge wrong as well. It's an opportunity to sort of hide that. So you can make your setting edge perfect, as long as you've got the thickness to do it. You're putting a bit more over one end than the other end, so you're straightening everything out. Think ahead a little bit and end up with a nicer piece of jewellery. I think customers will be much more happy with that, looking all symmetrical and nice, than one that was made really technically perfect for a stone that was a bit wonky. So going back to what I mentioned in the past, sort of making things wrong on purpose to make them look good at the end. Yeah, stuff like that happens making jewellery. So I just noticed mine starting to twist that shape, so keep an eye on that. I've got 2 pairs of parallels I always use for this kind of thing, just tweaking everything back straight. See that? Got this shape now. Just a little bit tight on there, so when it's in, file the outside, file the inside a little bit, get it fitting nice, and file the outside, get all the corners nice and sharp. Got the thickness there to get away with this kind of behaviour. So this next corner, I'm just going to scratch a little line. Let me do it properly. It's not perfect, but it is a good guide. So I'll start my bend. I'll look closely, like really check I like it, and I might just think, okay, bend it a little bit this side of the line or from that side of the line. It's just a good guide. Yeah, just this longer side of the line should be a good place to bend it from. But anyway, yeah, sometimes I scratch a little line on there just to help me out a little bit. So I literally just start it a bit and then double check. Okay, it's pretty good. A little bit tight is what I want. I'm planning on filing out the inside as well. So I don't want any gaps. So I like to use blue tack or any kind of like sticky putty when you're starting to close it up. It's convenient to be able to sort of hold it and just sort of push it down into position and just look at it from the top without your fingers getting in the way. I mean, maybe you can start the whole job with it on like that. It's quite good. So, yep, as you were. Last corner, closing it up now. What I'm doing, I want to be able to close it up and be confident that that side, the last side, is going to be nice and flat and lined up well. So I will tweak it out of position on purpose. Just enough to go by. You don't have to bend it more than you really need to. Wow. Let me just test it out a little bit. I have to move these tools in case I drop my very not expensive fake emerald. Right, where were we? This side. So just looking at that, can you see that that side is all kind of good? This one is still out a little bit. This is difficult to hold looking through the camera screen, but basically, yeah, I'm lining it up. I'm expecting to see a gap down that side. So I'm going to make sure that corner is really good, squeeze it up so it's a nice right angle. Then we should be able to just fold that up and then finish with that side being completely flat, parallel to that. with the join cut just so when I fold it up, it's just perfectly tight and everything's all nice. So I've been folding it up. See, it's out of alignment. Overlapped them. I had it all kind of square, so I was quite happy with its dimensions. And then I've just pulled it open again a little bit, so you can see it's like a bad shape now. It's like out like that. I've done that on purpose. I'm going to cut through it. I want metal. I want to be able to close it up and then cut through that join again, get it really tight, and hopefully finished with it all nice and straight. This is another reason why I don't want to work from a corner, because doing this is difficult enough to get everything flat and the perfect sort of measurements. Difficult enough when it's just straight ends together. It's even harder on a corner. And you've got to deal with fancy angles and stuff. Put a little mark in it. If in doubt, just pull it out a little bit more. If you've got the more metal to work with, even better. As you gain experience, you can be more confident with where you cut it, and then you can cut it really close, close it up, just one saw cut, go through it, and all fits nicely, nice tight join. You're sort of on the professional level where you've got experience, you can cut it correct place with the minimum amount of work and get the best result. That's the difference of having experience or not. But if you're trying this for the first time, just take it easy, just pull it out, give yourself a bit of metal to play with. If you'll cut through it a few times or even open it up again and file it because you left way too much, not a problem. When you cut through the ends at this stage, try to keep cutting all the way through. Sometimes it gets really painful to hold, or your fingers are hurting, they're just aching from the pressure, or it's just uncomfortable, it's really sharp, it's really painful. But you've got to keep cutting, because if you stop and then start again, especially if you were squeezing it closed, it doesn't really work, because you've got to squeeze it exact same amount. And when you start cutting again, it doesn't really line up nicely. Very difficult to get a join really good if you stopped and then started again. So even if you're in a lot of pain, keep going. It's only a little bit of metal. So it's a bit springy, got that gap opened up. I need to tighten it up. Don't just blindly grab it and squeeze it shut. There might just be one corner that needs folding. Do it from that corner. So if you're happy with it and you pushed it together and everything's all lining up nicely, solder it up. I will be using English medium silver solder. It's proved itself better than anything I can get in Japan. And will not be using solder paste. Check out my previous video, because I like to have control about how much solder I'm putting on something. Oh, I can turn this on. Oh, I hate this torch. I'm still trying to pass my exams to get my license so I can get proper soldering equipment. If your joint is tight, you're less likely to have problems when you're soldering. You need less solder to do the job. It'll flood where you want it to. It'll go easier, it'll work first time. Proceeding quicker and neater. Making a higher quality piece of jewellery. Right, so I'm going to let that cool down, put it in the acid, and continue. Right, so close-up time. I took out the acid, I tapped it flat, just testing the stone on it. This is kind of good. I want it to be just not quite fitting through, so I have to file everything back straight. And you want to keep that amount of work to the minimum, because you could make it a bit too small and like, yeah, you've got space around it with your chunky bit of metal, but if you're giving yourself loads of filing to do, it just takes you longer to finish the job. So you want to get it like just so it's like doesn't quite go through. There's a bit of work to straighten it out around the inside, but not loads. That's kind of ideal. So I've decided to work on the inside edge, get that stone just sliding through, just so. Doing that now. I just want to mention again, if you've got a stone that's slightly like tapering, like one, you might have three sides really good, but just one goes in a little bit. This is the sort of your moment to straighten that out. So you end up with a nice straight looking collet and hides the fact the stone's a little bit wonky. So you need to, it's more complicated if you've got to do that, obviously. This stone's actually pretty good. So anyway, so I'm filing out the inside, getting everything flat, get those corners looking cool, and hopefully that stone just slides just through, and then much quicker and easier to go around the outside after that. Select your weapon. I'm going for a safety back needle file. Without trying to be accurate into the corners, I'm just going to make the flat bits flat. Sort of flattening them out and making sure they're nice and straight as well. Because this surface has all been handled by pliers and that, so it's going to be a little bit wavy. Just touching both sides there. I'd almost say I prefer it slightly tighter, so I've got more space to manoeuvre around the inside, but basically it's good. Just got to be careful not to file too much off accidentally. It's really sort of there already. So what I'm going to do now is, what am I going to do? I want to mark, I'm going to hold the stone above it, and I'm going to mark the corners, and then I know where I'm filing to. I'm putting that stone upside down on top of it. Again, when I'm doing this, giving myself a guide is not really perfect, but at least I've got a good idea where to cut up to, or cut that flat. Square needle file, simply put that flat on. You have to proceed slowly, do a bit, check it, make sure you're getting that flat at the correct angle, because as soon as you've done it wrong, you can straighten it up and you've just made it sort of too far out from the stone. So quite important you get these right at a good angle. So I achieve that just by starting it and then checking it all the time. And literally just that, just so I can see the direction of the flat. So this is the corner I'm working on, yeah. It's not finished, but I just want to show you what I'm seeing when I put mine up close to it. Oh, I don't know if you can tell, it's dark here, isn't it? But basically, I'm lining it up, I'm looking at that flat of the stone and then that flat of the stone, and then checking the corner and see if there's any gaps around it. But I mean, it's setting, yeah. You can try and make it nicely, but it's setting, so they're like you're stretching the metal over the stone. So it hasn't got to be perfect, but if you make it close, if you make it, as always, if you make it accurately, the next step is much easier. If you've got a bit of a wobble and you've got to start trying to fill metal in over that wobble, over the stone, and then cut it back and make it all look straight again, you're sort of creating more work for you at the next step. So try and make it nicely, but at the same time, it's not hugely important that you get it really perfect around the stone. But I would recommend you still, I did actually end up drawing a dot on my stone because I did feel like one corner was a little bit narrower than the other three. Yeah, keep that system going. Make sure you're putting it on the same way every time, and then adjust the corners for the stone best you can. But it's not really important that it's perfect. At the same time, try and make it perfectly. Right, mine's sort of slotting in there. pushed it down a little bit. It's holding in position, which I kind of like. It means it's sort of tight. Having a closer look. My flat sides are good. That corner and that corner, not as good as the first two I did, but totally settable. So I'm going to leave that like that. Just pop that out. Now is probably easier going around the outside and making it look all straight and nice. Right, first thing I want to do is flatten the top and bottom. That gets rid of all the little strange colour changes and little wobbles in the metal, because they can cause illusions and throw your eye off. Do the top and bottom. It's got to be nice and flat, yeah. If this was going to be soldered on a ring, it's got to be like, it's got to sit nice and flat. Can't have any wobbles in it. If you're tapping it with your hammer on your metal block, I would say might be an idea to put something flat and metal on it and tap that. Get the whole thing flattened in one go rather than moving across it with a hammer. Right, so I did top and bottom. My stone was pretty good, like I keep saying, like your stone can be wonky, so this is your kind of moment where you're straightening that out if you need to. Mine was pretty good for the large flat sides. It's only the corners, one corner was a little bit off. So I can quite confidently just use my inner edge as a guide to get the outer one straight. Even though this is a little bit rectangular, if you've got a square collet punch block, you can put it in if it fits, put it in the bigger square hole and then tap it. That helps you cheat and get the sides perfectly parallel. Oh, there's a cat at the door. So I'm just going to touch all four. Start to define the corners. It's nice if you get all the measurements of all four sides all matching each other, the corners are going to look really good. Make sure you know what's your top and what's your bottom. Maybe it'd be an idea to, and I file both, but maybe it's an idea to just file the top and then work from that. And then as a last thing, just get the bottom flat, and then you know for sure which side you're working on. I can sort of recognise my corners the way I cut them, so I just confidently know this is my top. And it's a setting edge, yeah, so we can take off. I've got a lot of metal there, I can take off quite a lot, but I do actually need to as well. I've got to file in quite a lot before these corners are going to look good. Maybe if you're doing this for the first time or you're still learning, start with a cut 2 or something file. When you've got a bit of experience, you can just go straight to more coarse ones and just rip into it and get it to where you want. Just stop and look at it all the time. Make sure you're not doing any weird angles. Don't want to end up with a weird sort of parallelogram. And then if you want, by all means use a set square thing just to check your angles. But right angles are relatively easy to see them by eye if they're good or not. So I've been around it. I moved down to a newer, less coarse file, so it's nice and sharp, but doesn't cut quite so severely. It's just because, you know, if I cut right up to the dimensions I need with a coarse file, there's going to be a lot of papering to do, so you lose a bit dimensions. Like you've got a slightly finer tooth one, it's a bit more friendly for going up to the finish line and then finishing it off without still making drastic changes to the dimensions of it. So just pushing it in. If the stone's horizontal, it squeezes down quite nicely, but I just want to see it in there, just so I can confidently put that file on there. I might even draw a line to help me out a little bit. So just put in the stone in the setting, just pushed it down a little bit, it's holding in there. Sorry about the noise outside. Again, I don't really need this, but I like having the guides to follow. So I'm looking at the stone when I'm drawing this line. Try never to let your ego get in the way of you working carefully. Like, even I've got all these years experience, I'm confident I can do that without drawing these lines and checking it. I would check the stone, but then just from memory I would confidently file the corners. But if I let my ego get the better of me, I'll just be like, oh, I don't need to look, don't need to check, and just file it, just do what looks good, and then it might be wrong one way or the other. So yeah, just going careful and slow is always the best way, because you've done all this work. If you've done a nice job up until now, it's a shame to kind of ruin it a little bit or make a mistake where you have to finish it not as good as it could have been, just because you couldn't be bothered to take the time to pick the stone up. Once you've got one good, you checked it with a stone. Even though we drew these lines, I've got that first one quite good. When you check it with a stone, it all lines up. I can now use that as a guide for the others. Top tip, when you're checking things, you're trying to match up sides, opposing sides, and they've got to be parallel. Use these. Don't ignore the numbers, but just use the parallel sides just to check what you got, what you're doing. And you can see a little gap, like mine's perhaps a little bit chunky there. Oh no, let me line that properly. Right, now I can see from that, because it's flat that way as well, that wall is a little bit wrong, a little bit tilting down. So I'll straighten that. Oh, I can even see it quite clearly looking down on it that way. So anyway, yeah, just go around it with these, and then that gives you little tips on what you need to do to improve it. Alright, so I've filed around it a little bit more, just sharpened up the angles, just matched them up a little bit better. It's a rub over set, it's bezel set, it's got to be pushed over the stone, so on an emerald or something, thinner might be a bit more convenient or a bit safer for setting the stone. But I'm changing this now, there's another change we're doing to it. What I was going to say, yeah, it does depend on design. Like if you're making a ring, your own design, depends how much space you got as well. Like you might need a really thin edge because you want to keep the size of the top right down, or a bit thicker, doesn't matter that much. You can even have, if you've got space around it, nice to have pave set diamonds all the way around that, outside of that sort of a cluster. Anyway, so I'll show you the next stage of what I'm planning with this. So make sure you get this right, top or bottom, which one is what, and then we are putting a tapered edge on it, so filing it thinner towards the top edge. So there is going to be a thinner, more convenient edge for setting, but I want that look. I want to see it from the side. I don't want a blocky kind of straight-sided wall setting edge. I want to taper it up a little bit. But the reason I go to this stage first is just because it's easier to get it all accurate. You can match up the corners nicer. Looking at it this way, you can see the symmetry of them, just the distances of them. Everything's a bit more convenient for looking at it and judging things more accurately when you've got everything just all straight. So I get it straight first, and then I taper it. I mean, it's just how I work. You might be confident just to go straight to the angled one, but this is just how I work. So I would recommend doing the sides first. Just let the corners do what they want to do, and then you can adjust them after. So holding it this way, it's a thin bit of metal, yeah, so be careful with what file you're using. Maybe don't go too coarse because you might risk just really gripping it on the tooth and bending out of shape. Make sure it's quite safe in your way of pushing it on the peg. You're not about to bend it. And I'm not planning on going like razor sharp right to the top. I'm going to leave a bit of a flat on there, just to save a bit of life for papering. Yeah, do it like this, so you can see the way you're filing it exactly, so you can keep everything straight. Just let the corners naturally do what they want to do. I'm just going straight across, just thinking about this edge. And then maybe when you get it to that kind of thickness, take a bit off going this way. Be careful not to ruin your straight lines. It's still got to be nice and parallel, opposing the other side. But again, don't go razor sharp on the top. Save some life in it for papering, and then setting, and then repapering, and then polishing. See that? Now that is really playing it safe. And it is actually a bit thinner than that, but it's got burrs all over it. I've been filing it, but you can see the angle on it now. I kind of like that angle, looking out from the side. If you can actually see it, it's there where I'm looking. So imagine it on a ring, seeing that angle, kind of like that. Loads of life left in it. And then nice and chunky on the bottom, so it's actually a really solidly secure setting edge, soldered on, really strong, with a bit of design to it. So I'm going to do this side, I'll do the opposite one, I'll do that flat side and then do the opposite one, and then have a close look at the corners and make sure if I've got to adjust them I will, if I've got to make sure they're all identical to each other. So next one, opposite to what we just did. Trying to show you the edge. I haven't touched the corners yet, so the corners are still actually straight up, but look at the angles and the shapes of them. They should match reasonably nicely. They should be identical little, what's that, trapezoid. It should look kind of good. So anyway, now I've got to take the corners in. So next corner, I'm not going opposite, I'm just going to do the one next to it, just because it's, I'll match them up looking down on it, not looking across corner to corner. If it's perfectly square, maybe you can do that, but this is a bit rectangular, so it doesn't really work. So I'm looking at the distances of the flat, the angles of the flat, that angle, the thickness of the top. There's a lot of clues. You could take a lot of clues from how to proceed or how to adjust it to make it good. But I hope it's sort of clear what I'm trying to do. So the side walls are still a bit thick, but I need to paper them yet. So I would paper them quite lightly just to make sure there's no file marks on there, and then that's ready for setting. I wouldn't bother polishing it or anything because, you know, setting is a lot of pushing and beating up the metalwork. But I just wanted to show you it at this stage with the stone in there because you can just tell it was a good move, tapering it off. It's got so much more finesse. Much more of a sort of designed, well thought out piece of jewellery if it's got that. So I'm just going to paper disc it, and then that's kind of the end of this video really. That's all it was about, showing you how to make it. I said before in the video, I think we were fitting the stone in it, I was like, don't worry too much about the accuracy. I mean, it's got to be good, it's got to be tight around the stone, it has to work as a setting edge, but at the same time, don't fret too much about it. And I'm going to say it again, even at this stage, when I'm calling the video finished, it's still, if this is a proper setting edge for a piece of jewellery you're making, it's still a long way from finished, so make it accurately, make it good, like practice doing your best always, but at the same time, that's still got to be set, so the metal's going to be pushed about. You might lose these sharp edges a little bit, so you might have to paper disc it. Be very careful if you're paper discing near a stone when it's set in there, especially in emerald. Yeah, rubber wheels, needle files even, bus sticks. Yeah, so it's still going to get beaten up quite a lot. So I'm going to say it's important to make it accurately. It's important to do a good job, but at the same time, it still needs work. So don't, like, go mad. Don't cry about it if it's a little bit wrong, because there's still room for adjusting it even after this stage. So there you go, I'm calling it finished. That's it. There's your setting edge for an emerald cut stone. One of those jobs is simple. It's nothing really complicated or difficult to understand, or even really difficult to do, but to end up with a good job, you've got to work carefully. It's got to be the correct dimensions, stone's got to fit nicely, the edges have got to be sharp, and the corners and sides have got to match. So it's just one of those sort of tests of accuracy, really, rather than anything physically complicated. So there's one solder. That's kind of it. But it's a good thing to practice if you haven't done that kind of thing before, just to test your accuracy and your patience and your attention to detail. It's a good little thing to practice. So Do exactly, even if you're not getting commissioned for big expensive jobs, do what I did. Literally do what I did. Just buy a cheap synthetic stone. Kind of big, helps you out because it makes it a bit easier to actually do it. And just have a go yourself. It's all part of the fun of learning a new skill. Rub over channel. Down that channel.